Mm. Hello, everyone. It's Jeremy, the existential wine guy. This is the day that I've been having. It's Jeremy, the existential wine guy, and it is time for the existential wine time. Today, we're going to do something really fun. At least it's going to be. I hope it's going to be fun for me. We're going to combine two of my favorite subjects. That we're going to talk about wine. We're going to talk about movies. We're going to talk about Star Wars because I'm a Star Wars sort of nerd. And more importantly, we're going to break it down a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the more mythological themes that come from the Star Wars movies and how they play out in our everyday lives. So just a little bit about me. My name is Jeremy. I'm a wine industry veteran of sorts. I do everything from consulting with wineries, specifically their tasting rooms about customer experience, and also private tastings for groups, individuals. We'll also do sort of like corporate events as well as a speaking series as well. So that's me, that's what I do, and I love talking about wine. You know, in talking about Star Wars has had a huge effect on my life. Yeah, I'm absolutely one of those nerds. And going back and thinking about, you know, what inspires me about Star Wars, how I got into it originally, and coming up with wines that I think fully are good examples of what the Star Wars movies are. This was just like a really fun task. I even took last week off just so I could get going with this week. So without further ado, we're going to start right into it. Star Wars for me came out in 1970. Well, for me, it came out for everybody. I guess I should also explain really quick that I'm going to be talking about all of the Star Wars movies, and I'm going to do it in the order of theatrical release. I thought long and hard about how I should do this. You know, technically we could do this like, you know, linearly, you know, all the way from Phantom Menace to even the most recent Star Wars film, Solo. However, as I'm going to talk about Star Wars specifically and talk about some of the mythological themes, with it we're going to run parallel to the, you know, the ultimate hero's journey, which is the story of Odysseus in the Odyssey. And when we start off in the Odyssey, we actually start off in the middle of the story. You know, the Trojan Wars happen. Odysseus has spent almost 10 years trying to get home to no avail. And literally the gods, Athena, are going pleading with Zeus to allow Odysseus to make his way home. There's another interesting or the first interesting mythological theme that goes along with this is actually the story of his son. Odysseus' son Telemachus is actually asked by or told by Athena, the gray-eyed goddess of wisdom and war, to go find your father. And this is a major theme in mythology, and it is like one of those rites of adulthood. It's that first step towards adulthood. Telemachus has lived without his father. He's still sort of a young man. He's not king of his kingdom, as he probably should be, and he goes off to find Odysseus. And when we open with Star Wars, you know, we actually get a lot of those same themes as well. Oh, I guess I should talk about what I'm drinking and what wine we are actually going to pair with this film as well. So before we go a little bit more about Telemachus and Luke Skywalker, ultimately, one of the themes in both the Odyssey and Star Wars is the theme of go search for your father. It is asked by Obi-Wan Kenobi when he first meets Luke Skywalker that, you know, there's a call to adventure. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as well. And same as Telemachus, there's that parallel that happens to it. Star Wars, when it originally came out, is a mix of new and old. George Lucas had taken these, you know, archetype mythological themes, wrapped them up in a movie with influences of older movies, and then presenting it in a whole new fashion. So we're thinking old, we're thinking new. To me, when I thought about what wine goes with that, and I know I'm going to hear it, I know that, you know, there's going to be a little controversy about that, but my first thought was going to Merlot. And that's the wine that I've chosen to pair with Star Wars. Merlot's been around for about 1,000+ years. Ever since the Romans started designating different varietals, it has been out there. Now, arguably in the last 15 to almost 20 years, in America, in the United States, Merlot's taken a bit of a hit. But let me assure you that Merlot, a good Merlot, is around to stay. Today I am drinking a Firestone 2013 Merlot from the Santa Ynez Valley. So that's why I chose it. Merlot getting the bad rap that it's getting right now, it's absolutely unfair. It's coming, it stems, we know where it comes from. It comes from, the movie Sideways and one particular line in it. And, I've addressed this in the past, but I'm probably going to do another show just specifically on that movie and why everyone is wrong about Merlot. When Merlot is made well, it is absolutely fantastic. We get lots of wonderful red and bright fruit. This is a mainstay. I'm not sure how a wine that's, a varietal that's been around for about 1,000 years and people are, basically in love with, all of a sudden it just, all of a sudden it's fashion and it's no longer in fashion, so it's no longer made. What's interesting, the effects of that is that Merlot is not even as much planted like in Napa Valley, where it does really, really well, in favor of Cabernet. So the good thing about that is a lot of the glut of Merlot, or a lot of the Merlot that was made that maybe wasn't the best quality out there, those seem to have gone away a little bit, and now we're bringing, there's wineries, boutique wineries that are doing absolutely amazing things with Merlot, and Firestone just absolutely nailed it. I've been to the winery. It is an absolutely fantastic place to go to, so if you're down in that area, I absolutely suggest that you go and you check it out. If you're just joining me, my name is Jeremy Marin. I am the Existential Wine Guy, and we are talking about Star Wars, mythological themes, and what wine to pair with it. Again, I brought out Merlot. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well. As we move forward, one of the themes that we are talking about is the search for the Father, and the search for the Father is a coming to age and becoming an adult, and it's one of the first things that Luke Skywalker is actually asked to do in his trip to Alderaan. Another theme that I think is really important, because these archetypal themes have been around 1,000 years, and one of the great things about Star Wars, and it didn't matter that if you were 7 years old when I went to go to the theater in 1977, or if you were 80 years old, the themes that come through in Star Wars, especially A New Hope, are universal and instantly recognizable, and it's something that we immediately recognize as true, and these are themes that we identify with. I think that's one of the major appeals of Star Wars. And also, when the original, especially the first two movies, but I'll say the whole trilogy, except for the Ewoks, the movies weren't meant to talk down to kids, although kids who immediately identified with these movies became enthralled, like myself. We weren't talked down to. If anything, I think one of the more interesting things about the Star Wars films is that the kids, the audience in general, they stepped up to the themes. They stepped up to the ideas that were in Star Wars. And even if they were a little harsh for kids, there was quite a bit of violence. It was tame, but it was still there. And one of those themes that I want to talk about, and I think it has an impact on my life, and I think it has had an impact on almost everybody's life, is refusal of the call. Now, one fair argument for Luke Skywalker is he was incredibly whiny through every single film the character was in. He was, starting off, he was an untested soul, and he was, angry and impatient and full of fear and doubt. When Obi-Wan first meets him, Obi-Wan invites him to come with him to Alderaan, to learn the ways of the Force, and to be a Jedi like his father was before him. And one of the things I found really interesting upon many viewings, and I've probably watched it way too many times, is the fact that Luke Skywalker doesn't agree. He actually refuses. He says that he won't do it. He has too much doubt in himself. He has too much expectation from other people around. And even though from the beginning, that scenes that you see of Luke in the movie, the only thing he wants to do is leave Tatooine. He wants to go out and, you know, join the rebellion. He wants to do all these things, but there's too much expectation on him. There's too many things that he feels like he's responsible to, that doesn't allow him to live his full life. Now, one of the interesting things about the whole idea of refusal of the call is when that happens in any mythological story or any sort of hero's journey, is of those two things, the first thing that happens is that circumstances change and he is forced, or the hero I should say, because it could be a man or a woman, the hero of the story, his trajectory changes and they move, and he's forced to go on that journey, whether he kind of likes it or not. And that's the call to adventure. The other thing that happens, what I think is almost equally as important, is the fact that when it doesn't happen, the character dies. In that case, it's a very short story, or it's a sidebar. It's a secondary character who decides not to answer the call. And mythologically speaking, I think that's something that affects all of us, even in our present day. There are times that we know what the right thing to do is. We feel a call to adventure on very many levels. And when we refuse that, when we refuse to follow our bliss, to follow the things that we know are true or believe, a part of us dies. And I've always found that very interesting about this, that when we talk about the refusal of the call. Luke Skywalker, of course, answers the call, but only after his aunt and uncle are killed by stormtroopers. And maybe this is a question I'm going to throw out to you. Can we be our full selves while we still adhere to the expectations of others? Think about that for a second. So here it is again. Oh, and if you're just joining me, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. We are talking about wine, we are talking about film, and we are talking about life. So back to the original question, and the idea is, can we live our full lives while still living up to other people's expectations? I think at some point we have to change that. We can't live, we can't be our full, we can't follow our true path listening to other people and adhering to their rules and even society's rules, that we are each individuals and we have to follow our own bliss. And that's something that, really this happens in the first 30 minutes of the movie. So when we're talking about Star Wars, of course, it's the thing that happens early on. And I think that is one of the first, digs that, it gets into your soul when you first watch this film. And what I'm also surprised at is how much everybody sort of gets that, regardless of age. I think that's one of the great things about Star Wars and why it lasts or holds up as well as it does now, is those themes don't go away. These moments of truth, things that that we believe in, stay with us. That's one reason that if you're George Lucas and you're out there, why I'm so against remastering the films. Sometimes they just need to stand alone. Changing one little aspect, even if it's an explosion, Han shot first, by the way. Those are the things that are important to the film. They're important to the audience, and it's what resonates with us. So would love to hear any comments that you have, whether it's live or whether it's you catch the replay. I'd love you to post your comments. I'd love you to think about that particular idea as we talk about the Star Wars films going forward. I was hoping to do 3 films in one session, and I realized that as the more I started thinking about Star Wars, the more of the impact it had on me and all the themes that go through this. I could be here for hours just on that one film. Let's face it, there's too much wine to drink. I just can't stay here and talk about it all day. But actually, I could. But so anyway, what we'll probably do going forward is both this session, the next section will both be, both have one movie attached to it. And then as we move forward, we probably get in two at each time. Anyway, if you have any ideas or you have questions about wine or Star Wars, would love to hear those from you. I want to thank a couple people who have joined us. Kitty Gaga, thank you so much. Jeff from Bucky, and I just ruined your last name, sorry. Photography, thank you so much. It's good to see you there. Russ actually had a comment, and he says, I don't think we can live out our lives if we're worried about what people think about us. You nailed it. Thank you. I don't think I nailed it. I think Star Wars nailed it. But those are those truths that we find in film, and it's also the mark of a great filmmaker. Very often, if we can have just one or two moments in any film that ring true for us, I think that's a success, because it's so, there are so many different themes. There's so many different ideas that you can put through to movies. And some people don't watch movies for this reason. People watch movies, just mindless entertainment. I've never looked at it that way. Film has affected me in a very deep way ever since I was a kid. And, these are the things I was thinking about even, when I was 7 years old, and I'm watching this spectacle that I think even at 7 years old, I didn't know what I was going into at that time. I knew it happened when it came out. It floored me, and it changed my life, and incrementally and exponentially as I grew older. So anybody who wants to throw away Star Wars as just some sort of big budget, blockbuster type film, I dare you to look a little bit farther into those films. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. I talk about the experience of being alive through wine and sometimes film. So we're talking about Star Wars. We've been talking about some of the mythological themes that go through the Star Wars movies, specifically Star Wars A New Hope, and we're drinking wine along the way. Again, if you missed it already, I chose a Merlot to sort of personify and find a wine that represents Star Wars A New Hope better than any other wine. And again, my reason why is we're talking about old themes and sort of new packaging. And Merlot, I think, is absolutely a great example of that. Again, Merlot has been around for, we've been drinking Merlot as a recognized varietal for over 1,000 years. Again, in California, we've had a little mishap with it most recently in the last 20 years, and it's fallen out of favor in a big way. And people may look down on the Merlot varietal as well, pedestrian may be a good way to put it. There is a fair argument for it. There is, because Merlot is so popular, it is the first wine for a lot of people. There was, I think, and still is probably a lot of not great Merlot out there. But what I'm finding is that people are taking hold of wineries, boutique wineries, especially in Northern California. This is out of, I think, the Paso area in terms of where it's made. But you're starting to see people do new and interesting things with Merlot, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I want you to, reconsider at the very least two things: how you look at films, what films personify the things that are going on in your life. And I want you to reconsider Merlot. I think it's an amazing varietal, although I don't like to use that word so much in the wine industry. But having said that, it has so much to offer. And one thing that I was helping pour for a winery up in the Sierra foothills, and that area is really known for, all their wines are deep and rich and dark fruit. And the winery I was pouring for at the time, they produced a Merlot. And one thing that I really found that I really enjoyed was this idea that I was tasting something different. It was something very different than what everything else was up in that area. So while like other wines certainly were deep and dark, and you have that rich, dark cherry notes to it, and hints of cinnamon, all of a sudden you had something that was a little bit different, more red fruit. It was just a little bit brighter. It seemed for me to open up the palate and just really just have it. I had a really great time with it. So here I am talking about Star Wars and Merlot. If you have any other thoughts on some of the themes that you like in Star Wars, I would love to talk about it. One of the things that when you took a look at Star Wars A New Hope, the one thing about it is compared to every other film in the series, it is a more fully complete film. If Star Wars was made and no other movies were made after, it could still stand alone. It would still stand up. The themes that we have going there is, like I was talking about, the search for the father. We were also talking about refusal of the call. We're going to talk, I have a lot to talk about, especially when we get to Empire Strikes Back, because it's a deep and it's a dark film, and nothing seems to go right for our heroes. But coming back to Star Wars, one of the things that they talk about is, actually, there's, two, the redemption scene of Han Solo, because, at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, maybe that's a better way to put it, Han Solo is a bad guy. He's a rough cat without a lot of redemption to him. And certainly he finds his moment of redemption and helps Luke blow up the Death Star. So you have that. But there's actually a much more interesting scene right before that, when Luke Skywalker is in his X-Wing fighter, Red 5, and he's, going through sort of the canal there, and he has this, the computer that's going to tell him when and how to shoot. And there's that moment when he turns the computer off, that he hears Ben's voice, and he says to trust himself and to use the Force and to trust yourself. Man, is that a scary idea? Just to cast off society, cast off the mechanical, believe in yourself, and move forward. And that's exactly what Luke does. So when he does, I don't know if you were in the theater, even as a 7-year-old, he turns it off. And the crowd literally cheered. It was extraordinary. And they immediately recognized that he was unshackling himself to technology, looking within, using his own confidence and spirituality, using the Force, and eventually saving the day. So we're getting close to the end. I like to keep these just around 20 minutes or so. But I think that, again, it's just another amazing idea that happens in Star Wars. It's such a life-affirming movie. It challenges us. It expects us. It raises us to a certain level so we have to, at the very least, respond to, if not elevate ourselves to. On top of it, you can say what the negatives about the film are right on. Worst script ever. Sometimes kind of bad acting. Sorry, guys. At the end of the day, there are things that happen in certain films that end up being greater than the sum of its parts. And Star Wars, for me, absolutely is one of those films. So I'm very excited to talk about the next few films, and we'll do that in the next couple of weeks. I want to thank everybody who joined us. We have Charlene, thank you so much. Ken, thank you so much for joining the broadcast as well. If you didn't jump in right away, no worries. I'm going to be posting this up in just a few minutes. There's even a little poll that you could answer whether you like this theme, like this type of subject matter or not. Please let me know. It's not going to stop me this time around because I'm going to complete this entire series of Star Wars. However, it will sort of inform me for things going forward. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you got something out of it. And if you didn't, hey, give me that comment too. I'd love to hear from you. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. Thank you so much for joining my Facebook and Instagram Live, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers, guys. Oh, and please, let's not forget about Merlot. Cheers.